Kartikeya Sharma, in fact, earlier spoke to my colleague Neha Bhan, and they sort of outlined the detail of this unrest and also what does it mean for Nepal and Nepal's current administration. Let's take a look at that.
Kartikeya Sharma, he joins me live from the newsroom with more details on the same. Kartikeya, some very powerful visuals, they're coming in from Nepal. You know, as I said, this is a striking visual of defiance. The anger is really running deep in Nepal.
Anger is deep in Nepal. The whole question yesterday was, will Nepal go the Sri Lanka way or will Nepal go the Bangladesh way? It seems that Nepal is oscillating between the Bangladesh and Sri Lanka example, because in Sri Lanka the protesters restored the democracy, though at that point of time the ruling family, they all had to flee Sri Lanka, and they were, as per the constitution in Sri Lanka, they are supposed to protect the president and the prime minister. That is why Mahinda Rajapakse's family was on a naval fleet, was on a ship, and they had left for Malé and then subsequently to one country in Southeast Asia, and then they came back. And since then, you know, they have not been seen publicly in the political life of Sri Lanka. But in Bangladesh, opposite happened. It was a regime change whereby the ruling party was banned from contesting elections. There is a witch hunt which is taking place against Awami League, and the repercussion was directly on India. And Awami League was called stooge, and you know, the Islamists came out on the streets. So in this way, I would say that at least the protests in Nepal are not anti-India protests, one thing. These protests have nothing to do with India. But the larger issue is, are these protests something to do with the foreign hand? That's number one. Second issue is, simultaneously, number of countries in South Asia getting destabilized. In Malé, there was an anti-India campaign that ran on the wave of which the current government came, the Moizu government. And then you have the government in Sri Lanka. Khaleda Zia is in India as a political refugee, and her party is not being allowed to contest elections. Then in Sri Lanka, at least there is a degree of normalcy because the elections took place and Dissanayake has become the person who is in charge of the country. But in Nepal, the issue is that now the ruling party is losing majority, but there is no political center. The problem is there is a lack of political center. People are ransacking symbols of political power. Nepal is a nascent democracy. We have to understand. Democracy was not something that was visible in Nepal 30, 40 years ago. Nepal was a Rajshahi. It was in a way a Hindu state. It was a Hindu Rashtra. Then Nepal became secular, though Hindu Rashtra is still part of the constitution, though there is no political consensus on it. But Nepal somehow finds itself in the cusp where democracy has taken roots. There's a new middle class, Gen Z. They're connected to the outside world, but you have the old feudal politics which still have control of the economic levers in Nepal. And people are angry with them. There is an issue of proselytization in Nepal, and I'm not talking about the Muslim proselytization. The Christian proselytization is an issue in Nepal, and that too by Presbyterians. Another big issue is that Nepal has a deep Chinese influence. For example, the old Nepal, the old palaces, instead of being renovated by ASI, all these palaces are being renovated by private Chinese firms. India, for example, was in charge of Angkor Wat for decades. One of the most beautiful parts of Southeast Asia, but that contract was not given by Nepal government to the India. So there is also an element of distrust, but thankfully these protests are not anti-India protests. These protests are against the Nepali dispensation. Most of these Nepali leaders have big houses, they live in outskirts of Kathmandu, and they are ruling families in Nepal. You know, I really don't want to name them, from Koiralas to others. They are ruling families in Nepal. Now Prachand, number of prime ministers have come and gone, but the Nepalese citizens have not seen the benefit of the accord that came into shape in 2006 when Manmohan Singh was the prime minister. That laid the foundation of the new constitution of Nepal. But the peace is so fragile, in Nepal that the lack of consensus on governance and issues has created a volatile situation like this. I would only say that social media, the ban on application is like having a temperature. It's a symptom. It does not reflect larger malice. Now, if you look at the data, the houses of the Communication Information Technology Minister Prithvi Subba Gurung in Lalitpur has been torched. Residence of Deputy Prime Minister, Finance Minister Bishnu Paudel has been ransacked. House of former Home Minister Ramesh Lekhak has been ransacked. Why are these areas being ransacked? You know, the police is also there, but they are not able to control it. There's a plane that is on standby for Mr. Oli to leave for Dubai, and it was Mr. Oli who had taken a very anti-India position. If you look at Mr. Oli's tenure, he was trying to ratchet up anti-India sentiment to shore up his political constituency. He was trying to make India a whipping boy. Lipu Lake controversy, Mr. Oli. Sita Temple controversy, Mr. Oli. So I think Mr. Oli forgot to curb corruption in Nepal. Mr. Oli forgot to work the basic job of a Prime Minister. And Mr. Oli forgot the basic function of a politician. If you don't have majority, run a coalition smoothly. He did not do that. It is for this reason he has not got an iota of support in his hours of crisis. Not an iota of support. And the protest, we can't sit here in judgment and say whether these are organized or spontaneous. Because what happened in Bangladesh was a regime change. What happened in Sri Lanka was spontaneous. What happened in Bangladesh was a backdoor entry of Jamaat-e-Islami. What happened in Sri Lanka was a complete revolution. Dissanayake, a former radical with someone with extremist view, has gone on to become the Prime Minister of, has gone on to become the Premier of Sri Lanka. He's the guy who runs the country. So,
Kartikeya, you know, I'm going to interrupt here a bit and I'm going to ask you, you know, you've said that Nepal is oscillating between Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, and you've also spoken about China's influence. The question here is, does China's shadow over Nepal risk sort of, you know, tipping the balance one way, either by backing Oli or by shaping how this crisis really plays out?
I think there are a lot of issues there. I think, you know, India will have to wait and watch, Neha. Secondly, you know, in terms of crisis, I think it from a different perspective. If this crisis moves out of Kathmandu, then it is a big problem for the entire Nepal, because then it becomes a troubled issue. From the Indian perspective, I think there is already a lot of trouble. We are trying to normalize relationship with Afghanistan. Pakistan is completely out of orbit with, getting cozy with Trump. We had problem with Maldives, but we have stabilized the issue. We have stabilized issue with Sri Lanka, but Ranil Wickremesinghe has been arrested, who is Sri Lanka's friend. Myanmar is a fractured state. Bangladesh has become hostile to us. China is already hostile. So if Nepal goes awry, then it's a big problem for India. From the South Asian context, it's a huge problem from India. You know, one after another, in the name of popular protest, established governance is getting punctured. Who wants to deal with people who have no roots in the setup of administration, bureaucracy, military? We have had a very bad experience with Bangladesh. And then, what did Muhammad Yunus say? He actually referred to a person who was with him working in America and said he was the mastermind. And they were all part of the Clinton Foundation. And now it's all clear that what happened in Bangladesh got support from the American foundations. So I'm not trying to delegitimize the anger of an average Nepali. I'm not. Because if you look at the social media feeds, people are saying it's not about social media, it's not about application ban, it is about Nepo kids. It is about dynasties. It is about politicians. It's about corruption. It's about lack of delivery for common people. You know, that's the issue. You know, Kathmandu has its own share of problems. I know when I was there last time, there was a huge protest that was taking place in Kathmandu. Workers in this civic administration were not taking the garbage off the streets. So I'm not saying that the Nepal never had its problem. Nepal had its problem. Even after 2006, the governments have been very shaky. What Nepal has been missing is a solid foundation. And on top of it, you have a complication, Neha. The complication is royalist and anti or pro-monarchist, I wouldn't say anti-democracy, pro-monarchists are trying to make a comeback, piggyback on this revolution. They want a greater role for the king. They are arguing that the king must have a role. 3 years ago, I did a documentary on it, Return of the King. But that number is very, very low. But that sort of a constituency is also being cultivated. So it's a very complex issue right now. So you have royalists, you have monarchists, you have communists, you have Democrats, you have people from the Congress, you have civil society members, you have unorganized journalists, you have so many people. And then on top of it, you don't know where the power vacuum is. Who knows, tomorrow the military might take over Nepal. That will be the end of the nascent democratic regime. So it's a very complicated issue right now.